best of times, the worst of times, in partnership with EarthX. So please welcome Armond Cohen, Executive Director of the Clean Air Task Force, Bradley Williams, Lead for Energy Policy and Strategic Analysis at Idaho National Laboratory, and 2020 American Nuclear Society Congressional Fellow, and Maria Korsnick, President and CEO of the Nuclear Energy Institute. Over to you.
Well, thank you and good afternoon. Thank you to Concordia for hosting this event and to EarthX for putting together this timely panel. I'm Maria Korsnick, President and CEO of the Nuclear Energy Institute, and it's an honor to be here. The title of this panel, The Best of Times, the Worst of Times, really speaks to the challenges and opportunities that our industry faces. And let's be clear, the headwinds are significant. Recent premature closures of some nuclear plants have shown that. But as we sit here today, I've never been more confident in the future of nuclear energy. I believe the best of times are just ahead. And that's partially due to an emerging consensus that nuclear energy is essential to the fight against the climate crisis. As we look to decarbonize our electric system, we know that simply using less energy is not the answer. We need to reduce emissions while simultaneously meeting a growing demand for electricity. And nuclear is the only proven, scalable solution to this equation. We know that nuclear can be the backbone of our clean energy future. The question now is whether it will be. Study after study has shown that every viable path to a decarbonized electricity system needs to include nuclear. And that's because nuclear is the world's largest source of safe, reliable, carbon-free energy. In the United States, nuclear accounts for a fifth of all electricity, but more than half of the total carbon-free production. So that's more than every other carbon-free source combined. Although my co-panelists today approach the issue from different perspectives, we all share an understanding of nuclear's potential. And we have reason for optimism. As we speak, there are more than 50 new nuclear plants under construction worldwide, and at least 170 more are in the advanced planning stage. And we're also on the brink of bringing the next generation of advanced nuclear technologies to market. Small modular reactors will bring reliable, carbon-free energy to hard-to-reach places. And new advanced reactor designs mean nuclear reactors can better vary their output, allowing them to pair perfectly with more variable sources like wind and solar. And a new generation of smaller, more nimble reactors will bring clean energy to places where large power plants really just don't make sense. The only question is whether we will allow it to. And with that, I'd like to introduce our first panelist, Armond Cohen. Armond is the Executive Director of the Clean Air Task Force, which seeks realistic solutions to prevent catastrophic climate change. He focuses on requirements to deeply decarbonize global energy systems. Armond?
Thank you, Maria. I think I should start out with a little bit of a history, which is that as a young attorney, my first job was attempting to stop a nuclear power plant from being built in New Hampshire, the Seabrook plant. That was in the 1980s when climate change was not as big of an issue and certainly not the dominant environmental issue that it is today. And I have come on 180 degrees on that over the period of the last decade or two, because climate is the existential threat to the planet's environment. And nuclear is a very significant option that could help mitigate some of the worst effects of climate change. So I've really come around on that. As Maria suggested, the analysis that has been done of decarbonizing the world's energy system has suggested that nuclear could be a very important option, maybe a critical option. Think about this. What the models are telling us is to not burn up the planet. We need to essentially zero out all carbon emissions from the energy system in about 30 years. It's a very short period of time. In addition to reducing electric power emissions, we need to get rid of all the oil and gas emissions from all the cars, from all the industries, from all the buildings. That's a gargantuan task. and to prematurely take off the table any particular resource, particularly one that has a very, very good track record historically of being built at scale and mitigating emissions very quickly, would be very foolish. So as an environmental organization that is primarily concerned with climate, we are very strongly pushing in favor of not only preserving existing nuclear plants, which, as Maria noted, are fully a fifth of today's power supply in the US and most of its carbon-free supply, but building a next generation that will most likely be less expensive, faster to build, safer, although the current fleet is plenty safe, and really tackling this emissions issue that is so desperately before us.
Thank you for those opening comments. First question to you, Armond. Study after study has shown that the most efficient, reliable path to a clean energy future includes nuclear, as you mentioned. What will it mean for people and the environment if policymakers don't value nuclear as they do other carbon-free sources?
So, Maria, I want to push back a little bit against the framing of the question, and then I'll answer it. I think what the studies are saying is that that to have a decarbonized power grid, even with all the wind and solar, which is abundantly available and which we are very rapidly implementing, it is important to have some 24/7, 365 resource that backs up or is available when the wind is not blowing and the sun isn't shining. Now, energy storage may make some contribution to that, but what we need is a firm, clean energy source. Now, nuclear is an excellent candidate for that. It's not the only candidate. Carbon capture and storage on natural gas could play some of that role. But going back to my original point, if we don't have that, this array of options, we're really stuck either with an unreliable system or a system that has fossil fuel generation driving global warming. If we don't maintain the current fleet, we've done these studies, clearly the near term, say 10, 15-year answer is it's going to be replaced by natural gas. And natural gas, while it is less polluting from a climate standpoint than coal, still has about 50%. Some would argue as much as 70 or 80% of the global warming effect of coal when you count the upstream methane emissions from wells and transport. So that's not a great outcome, especially since every molecule of carbon that we put in the atmosphere today will be here for many, many decades and even centuries. So we first of all have to maintain the zero carbon resources we have. Looking into the future, if we don't exploit every possible option, and getting to zero from where we are right now is a gargantuan task, we are going to be emitting fossil fuels for decades and decades. And that's just going to continue to drive the warming that we're seeing today. So it's a pretty clear trade-off.
Great. Well, thanks for that. And now I'd like to turn to Brad for our second panelist, Bradley Williams. Brad is the lead for energy policy and strategic analysis at the Idaho National Laboratory. Brad?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here today. Speaking in my capacity working for the Idaho National Lab. I would like to start, just put out a disclaimer. I'm speaking for myself. The opinions and comments that I make are mine and mine alone. I'm also a congressional fellow working for the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. So we'll not be speaking in that role. We'll be speaking from my lab hat on today. Very happy to be here. Nuclear energy is a passion of mine. It's extremely important for our national and global goals to meet many of our needs. It's right now, as Maria mentioned, the major contributor of our clean, reliable, non-emitting electricity. Over 50% nationwide, but in many of the states that have nuclear, it's 80 or 90, up to almost 100% of the non-emitting electricity in the states that have nuclear power plants. So in my view, absolutely critical for achieving carbon reductions and a net zero target in the future. It's also important for our energy security as the most reliable and resilient source of electricity operating over 90% of the time that it theoretically could. Nuclear is there when you need it, rain, shine, polar vortex, hurricane, no matter what. It helps ensure we have the electricity we need when we need it. It's also critically important for our economy, for our economic prosperity. Nuclear power plants are major contributors to their local economies, providing hundreds of jobs per plant and even more in supporting to the community, significant tax revenue at the local, state, and national level. It's critically important that we keep the plants that we have operating and address the market challenges that are causing them to retire prematurely. We need to be extending the life of our nuclear power plants, not shutting them down early. And then lastly, from a national standpoint, nuclear energy is critically important for our national security. The many aspects of nuclear technology that help us as Americans, live and enjoy the life that we have, from electricity and national security, it has a critical role to play in that. So I think it's absolutely critical. We need to be building more reactors. Advanced reactors are coming along that will really change the game and help contribute to the deep decarbonization that we need in the future. And that's why I'm passionate about working in the field.
That's great, Brad. And quite frankly, you went right into our first question, talking about building new. The Department of Energy is pressing ahead with various demonstration projects. Which are the projects designed to prove the viability and potential of new nuclear technologies? I guess talk us a little bit about that. And what could these promising efforts mean for the industry?
Absolutely. As I started saying, advanced reactors hold great promise for our future and hopefully our near future. We will continue needing the large base load light water reactors that we have currently operating in the US and around the world, but the new advanced technologies are really game changers, and they will complement the large reactors that are primarily base load generators very nicely. And the way I like to look at it is these advanced designs will complement each other and create a catalog of options for not only us in the US, but around the world. Micro reactors, very small reactors that could be used in remote locations or as part of microgrids. Small modular reactors that can be scalable to provide smaller amounts of electricity or paired up to provide larger amounts, and also coupled with renewables. And then other advanced reactors that we typically call non-water reactors, they use different technologies than the light water we use today. These can really enable a lot of new opportunities from reactors that can use what we could currently consider waste, our used fuel that we are currently storing at our reactor sites and will ultimately need to go to a geological repository. We can reuse that in reactors and minimize our waste generation and enhance our resource utilization, which is extremely important. And technologies are being developed to make that economical. And then other technologies that can provide high temperature process heat. So not only can we generate electricity, but we can also decarbonize the industrial and transportation sector with process heat to generate hydrogen, to produce chemicals, desalinate water, so we have fresh water supplies. It's even being considered in the oil and gas industry to help with enhanced oil recovery. Not to mention the medical benefits of producing medical isotopes. So there's lots of exciting aspects of the advanced reactors. And there's a new exciting program at DOE that is helping to accelerate the demonstration and deployment of these reactors. It's the Advanced Demonstration Program. It was initially conceived in a bill that's currently working through Congress, the Nuclear Energy Leadership Act, that hopefully, fingers crossed, will be passed into law by one way or another by the end of the year. But then the funding was provided in this current year's appropriation to DOE to start the program. The goal is it's multifaceted, but the primary goal is to have multiple demonstrations of advanced reactors in the next 7 years. And DOE is currently going through the process to evaluate applications, and as I understand it, hopes to have an awards, and at least initial awards, made by the end of the year. So it's a very exciting time for the technology development of these advanced reactors.
That is exciting. My gosh, you got a lot in there in that response. A lot happening. Armond, bring us back to today, though. I mean, some nuclear reactors today, they're closing prematurely. And in your comments, you talked about how significant that is, not only with the carbon-free electricity, but there's actually a lot of good-paying jobs as a result. And so it hits the economy. It also hits the carbon equation that you talked about. How can we ensure that these plants extend their license or get license renewal and stay in operation?
Well, I think there are two pieces to extending the carbon-free capability that we have from existing nuclear in the United States. The first is just to keep them operating currently on a cost basis. And it's worth noting, sometimes people will say, well, it's wind and solar that are outcompeting nuclear. It's not wind and solar, it's gas. And in the markets where nuclear is having to ratchet back for economic reasons, it's because gas is so cheap. And of course, gas has high CO2 content. So what we need to do is to level the playing field by recognizing the carbon-free attribute of nuclear. Several states have done that. New Jersey, New York, and others are considering that. So the first thing we have to do is the first thing you do when you want to win is don't lose. So let's keep those online. And there's a federal bill, actually bipartisan federal bill, that's by Senator Whitehouse and Senator Barrasso, that and others, draft bill that would create a federal incentive as we have for wind and solar. The second part, Maria, of course, is licensing reactors that typically are initially licensed for 40 years, but many have extended their lives to 60, and now at least one plan has been extended to 80. This can be safely done, and we'll need more of that. There's no reason these shouldn't all be 80-year plants. Obviously, the ones that have safety issues or other challenges would not be renewed, but that's a critical piece of infrastructure for the low carbon future to keep operating through the next several decades.
Great, thanks for that. And I think we might have time for one more question. I'm seeing a timer on our clock here, so I'm just going to assume that that's accurate. In closing, I'd like to ask both of you this question. What are the obstacles moving forward, and why should the United States take a leading role?
The U.S. is the gold standard for the world on advanced reactor technology. I've been around the world talking to people about advanced nuclear. If we don't lead, other countries will say, why should we do it if the U.S. is not willing to commit? I think it's pretty simple.
Excellent. And Brad?
Yeah, I agree with that completely. We have the smartest scientists and engineers, the best regulator in the world. We need to have our technologies leading the way in the global deployment, and that starts with demonstrating and deploying reactors domestically. We also need to reestablish our supply chain. We haven't built many reactors for a long time, so we need to reinvigorate that industry. There's a number of efforts underway, a number of bills. I mentioned one. Armond actually referred to another one that I'm working on, so thank you for that, where we're really trying to revitalize that supply chain. But we need to get going. We need to do things and build things, and build our relationships with countries around the world to let them know that we're and our technologies are here. The recent change for the Development Finance Corporation to finally allow funding of nuclear projects is a major step. And Armand's absolutely right. What we need to do, the right thing to do, is put nuclear on the same level, treat it equally with renewables, because we're going to need to have both if we're going to achieve our clean energy goals.